Imagine for a moment being a child in an orphanage back in 1939. The Great Depression is still casting its long shadow. Your parents are gone, and you have absolutely no safety net. No one to speak for you.
You're completely dependent.
Utterly dependent on the adults around you for everything.
Yeah.
Now picture one of these authority figures, someone you have to trust, looking you straight in the eye and telling you there's something fundamentally, intrinsically wrong with you.
Mm-hmm.
Not something you did, but something about your very being. Your voice is flawed. You speak incorrectly. You should feel ashamed.
And this isn't just, a one-off comment. This is relentless. It's methodical.
Right.
Every single natural hesitation, every normal pause, maybe a tiny stumble in your speech, it's immediately pointed out, highlighted, amplified as proof of this inherent problem.
And over time, that constant, that barrage of negative feedback, it starts to wear you down, doesn't it? It erodes your self-perception.
You start to believe them. You have to almost. You shrink inward, speaking less, hiding your voice, doubting every single word you even dare to think about uttering.
And the chilling part, the truly shocking truth is, there was never anything wrong with your voice. Not at all.
It was perfectly fine. The flaw, the deep, damaging, unforgivable flaw, well, it was in the experiment itself.
It's a truly harrowing thought, just imagining that. So today, we're diving deep into one of the darkest, most unsettling chapters in the history of psychological research.
Mm-hmm.
A study so ethically troubling, so profoundly misguided, it was later condemned by the very scientific community it was trying to advance. It got this name that just echoes its cruelty. The Monster Study.
A chilling name and appropriate, sadly.
Yeah. So our mission today is to uncover its origins, to explore its devastating lifelong impact on those children, and to really dig into the profound, uncomfortable lessons it continues to teach us. Lessons about the sheer power of words, the immense responsibility of authority, and, well, the enduring ripple effects of psychological harm. Okay, let's get into it.
What's really unsettling here, I think, is how easily the pursuit of knowledge, maybe even starting with what seem like good intentions, can just pave a path to severe, lasting harm, especially when it's unchecked by ethical oversight.
Right.
This study, really, it serves as such a stark warning. It forces us to confront this question of what we're willing to sacrifice, in the name of scientific discovery.
It absolutely does. So let's start by setting the scene. We need to step back in time to 1939.
Okay.
The world was literally on the brink of World War II. Global anxieties were, well, they overshadowed almost everything else. Societies were grappling with economic collapse, political instability, the looming threat of war.
A very different time.
Very different. And it meant ethical oversight in academic research was vastly different from what we understand and, frankly, demand today. It was a landscape where scientific ambition often outpaced any kind of collective moral compass.
Uh-huh.
Our deep dive takes us to the University of Iowa.
But the real location, the crucible of this experiment, the vulnerable stage, was the Iowa Soldiers' Orphans' Home in Davenport.
Right.
And this wasn't just any institution. It was state-run, housing children who were already incredibly disadvantaged. Think about it. Orphans during the Depression, many came from backgrounds of just profound poverty.
No advocates.
None. No significant family connections, no external advocates. These children literally had no one to speak for them, no one looking out for their interests. They were entirely dependent on the adults running that place for everything. Basic needs, survival.
Which made them exceptionally susceptible.
Absolutely. Susceptible to any form of manipulation, especially psychological. They had no recourse, no exit, no voice. They were basically a captive audience.
And the people behind this, the orchestrators, at the helm, was Dr. Wendell Johnson.
A big name.
A huge name. Prominent, highly respected figure in speech pathology at the time. Influential academic. His work was widely known. But here's where it gets really interesting and quite unsettling.
The personal connection.
Exactly. Johnson himself was a person who stuttered. Now, you can only imagine how deeply personal the whole phenomenon of stuttering must have been for him. This lived experience likely fueled an intense, maybe almost obsessive desire to understand it, to demystify it, perhaps even to cure it.
Which raises that uncomfortable question.
Did his personal stake, his own struggle, inadvertently blind him to the ethical chasm he was about to cross? Did his scientific curiosity, this deep desire for answers, just override his moral compass?
It's a critical point because the pursuit of knowledge, especially when it hits close to home like that, it can create massive blind spots. The line between empathetic inquiry and ruthless experimentation can get really blurry.
Yeah.
And then there was Mary Tudor.
Johnson's graduate student.
Right. She was the one actually doing the sessions with the children at the orphanage on the ground.
Which introduces another layer, right? The
Yeah.
power dynamics.
Absolutely. Here's this young graduate student, probably eager to impress her famous professor, executing his research design. What kind of pressure was she under? How much agency did she really have to question the methods, even if she felt, uncomfortable or saw the distress?
It doesn't excuse it, but it's context.
It's vital context, understanding the hierarchy, the pressures. It's part of understanding how this deeply flawed experiment unfolded.
So what was the actual question they were trying to answer, the driving force behind this?
It's centered on a really fundamental debate in speech pathology back then.
Yeah.
Was stuttering a learned behavior, something you pick up from the environment, conditioning, imitation? Or was it inborn, maybe neurological, a biological thing?
A nature versus nurture kind of question for stuttering.
Pretty much. And it was a scientifically valid question, important for the field. Think about treatment. If it's learned, maybe you can unlearn it. If it's inborn, therapy might focus more on coping, not a cure. The community was genuinely split.
And Johnson had a side.
Oh, definitely. He was firmly in the camp that it was learned. He believed it was often made worse by things like parental anxiety, mislabeling normal childhood speech errors as stuttering. He thought it wasn't an inherent defect, but a product of negative reinforcement, the child becoming hyper-aware of their own non-fluent speech.
Which is a fascinating hypothesis.
Yeah.
But the way they tested it.
That's the problem. This hypothesis, while interesting, led them down a path of deliberate induction rather than just observation. Instead of studying naturally occurring stuttering or looking at environmental factors ethically,
They decided to try and create it.
exactly, to try and force a definitive and horrifying answer.
Which really brings up that question for all science, not just back then.
Yeah.
When does pursuing knowledge cross the line? They thought they were just understanding a disorder.
But their method shifted from observation to active, targeted manipulation of the most vulnerable.
It wasn't about understanding something already there, it was about inducing it. That's where the alarm bells should have been deafening, even without today's rules.
It's that fundamental breach. First, do no harm.
And they seem to deliberately set out to do harm.
A chilling fact.
Okay, so we have the unsettling context. Vulnerable kids, a top researcher with a personal stake, a grad student in a tricky spot, all trying to answer this big question. Now let's get into the actual architecture of the harm. This is where the monster part really comes into focus.
Indeed. The participants were 22 orphaned children. Ages ranged from about 5 to 15 years old. And again, we have to keep emphasizing their vulnerability as orphans during the Depression. It's key to the ethical failure.
A captive population.
Totally at the mercy of the researchers. Couldn't leave, no parents to complain to, no one advocating for them outside the institution itself. That fact alone, by modern standards, makes the study inherently unethical. They were chosen because they were voiceless and powerless.
And they split these 22 kids into groups. A classic experimental design, but
with a deeply sinister twist. You had your so-called control group, which got what they termed the positive intervention.
what did that look like?
Basically, exactly what all children should receive. Consistent encouragement, affirmation. They were told their speech was perfectly fine, even if they had minor normal disfluencies for their age.
Just normal support.
Right. Praise, encouragement to speak freely, confidently, reassurance that they were communicating effectively. And this group serves as this stark, almost horrifying contrast to the other group.
It highlights how deliberate the negative part was.
Exactly. The researchers clearly understood the impact of positive reinforcement. They knew the power of words, which makes what they did to the other group even more indefensible. They weaponized that knowledge.
Okay, so let's talk about the negative intervention group. This is where the monster study earns its name. What exactly happened to these children?
Well, the methodology here was designed to be profoundly psychologically harmful, a deliberate assault on a child's developing self-concept. These kids were consistently told they had speech problems, regardless of whether their speech was actually normal or not.
Just imagine that. A child, maybe speaking perfectly fine, being constantly, relentlessly told by an adult they trust, an authority figure, that they are flawed, that they stutter.
It's deliberate misdiagnosis for research. Intentional gaslighting of a child's reality.
And it wasn't just a casual remark here and there.
Oh no, this was a sustained, targeted campaign. Designed to break them down psychologically, the techniques were insidious, calculated.
Like what specifically?
Any natural hesitation, a minor mispronunciation, even a normal pause. Boom. Immediately called out as a defect, a sign of a serious, looming problem. Praise wasn't just withheld, it was actively denied, almost punitively.
Wow.
Instead, these children got shame, relentless criticism, constant pressure to fix something that wasn't broken. They were told things like, stop speaking altogether if you can't speak perfectly. It wasn't just the absence of positive reinforcement, it was active, targeted emotional abuse, designed specifically to break down their confidence, make them hyper-aware of their speech in this negative, self-critical way. It was an attempt to instill what Johnson himself called a stuttering personality, this constant fear of speaking.
It's so hard to fathom, to actively try and make a child ashamed of themselves, to weaponize their own voice against them. What was the psychological impact on a developing mind? How does that kind of repeated invalidation create such deep conflict and fear?
For a developing child, their sense of self is incredibly fluid, right? It's so dependent on external validation, especially from authority figures who, in this case, represented their entire world.
They had nobody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when those figures constantly invalidate a core aspect of their expression, their speech, it creates this profound internal conflict. The child starts to distrust their own perceptions, their own natural rhythms of speech. They internalize the criticism. They start believing there is something inherently wrong with them, something they can't control.
Leading to anxiety.
Pervasive anxiety, yeah. A fear of judgment, a deep sense of inadequacy. Their internal voice shifts from, confident self-expression to this constant critical echo of the researcher's words. It literally teaches them learned helplessness in communication. It convinces them that any attempt to speak will just result in failure or shame.
It's psychological torture.
Aimed at stripping away a child's agency and self-worth, yes.
It's a chilling demonstration of how words from authority can literally reprogram a child's view of themselves and reality. Not just temporary feelings, but fundamentally altering their developing mind. So what about the immediate effects they observed? It sounds like their horrific experiment actually worked.
Sadly, yes, it did work in the sense that it produced the results they hypothesized, which makes it all the more disturbing. The immediate psychological fallout in that negative group was stark, undeniable.
What did they see?
Many children became visibly self-conscious about their speech, a tragic transformation. They grew withdrawn, reluctant to talk, clearly fearful of speaking. You could literally see them shrinking, avoiding eye contact, hesitating to form words. They were being actively silenced by the adults supposed to care for them.
And here's the crucial part, the really disturbing finding.
Yes. Several children in this group, kids who had absolutely no history of stuttering or speech issues, before this began to show clear, observable symptoms of stuttering, or at least significant hesitancy where none existed before.
So it wasn't just interpretation, it was observable.
It was a direct, observed outcome of the intervention. Their deliberate psychological abuse created the very condition they claimed they wanted to understand or cure. It's the ultimate ethical perversion.
The irony is just staggering.
Profoundly ironic and utterly tragic. A study aiming to understand stuttering ends up manufacturing it in healthy, fluent children. A scientific and ethical disaster. It proved Johnson's hypothesis, maybe, but at the cost of inflicting psychological and speech pathology on innocent children.
It showed the destructive power of negative suggestion.
And the alarming malleability of a child's psyche. They essentially fabricated a clinical condition through psychological torment, proving their theory by actively harming human beings.
So those were the immediate effects. But what about the long haul? Did these kids just get over it once they left the orphanage or the study ended? Or did the echoes of this reverberate through their lives?
Oh, the effects were undeniably long-lasting. They carried significant burdens into adulthood. Many survivors who we know about through later investigations and the lawsuit carried these scars for decades.
Like what kind of scars?
First, and maybe most pervasive, was profoundly lower self-esteem. That constant, targeted criticism during their formative years just deeply damaged their sense of self-worth. Being told you're flawed at a foundational level, your voice, your core expression, that belief gets ingrained, it impacts everything.
So it wasn't just about speech anymore, it was about them.
Exactly. That feeling of inadequacy bled into all other areas, and naturally, this led to significant social anxiety. The fear of speaking, instilled so cruelly, often manifested as social withdrawal, immense anxiety in interactions.
I could only imagine. Constantly worried about how you sound, feeling fundamentally wrong every time you open your mouth.
It would naturally lead to avoiding situations where you have to talk, isolating them further, limiting friendships, relationships, even career prospects.
In that isolation, that reluctance to speak, the shame, it must have had real-world impacts on their future opportunities, beyond just social stuff.
Absolutely. There were documented academic difficulties, being reluctant to speak in class, participate, ask questions, that likely impacted their education and, by extension, their life opportunities. How many doors closed, how many chances missed because of this instilled fear.
It's heartbreaking.
And beyond that, a deeply unsettling consequence, a lingering, pervasive distrust of authority figures.
Makes sense.
The adults they depended on, who were supposed to protect and nurture them, betrayed them profoundly. This fostered a deep-seated suspicion that would naturally extend to teachers, bosses, doctors, anyone in power. It's a lifelong wound poisoning the well of trust.
And what's just horrific, truly, is that these children were never told it was an experiment.
Never.
They believed for decades that they genuinely had speech problems. They carried that burden, never understanding their flaw was completely fabricated, intentionally induced.
That lack of transparency, the complete absence of follow-up or explanation, it just compounded the harm exponentially. It's one of the most egregious ethical violations imaginable, a betrayal of the absolute most innocent.
It speaks volumes about the complete disregard for them, not as humans, but as data points.
Exactly. They weren't seen as people with potential and feelings. They were subjects to be manipulated. And the decades of believing that lie, carrying a burden that wasn't theirs, that's an ethical breach almost impossible to comprehend, a profound failure of basic human empathy.
So this study, as we said, wasn't originally called the Monster Study. How did it get that chilling name? And why, if it proved Johnson's hypothesis, was it kept quiet for so long?
Right. The name the Monster Study wasn't self-proclaimed. It came much, much later, decades later, from peers within the speech pathology community itself.
So, internally.
Yes, as the field began a crucial period of introspection, grappling with its own ethics, and as the disturbing details of Johnson and Tudor's work finally came to light. The term monster referred not just to the outcome, but to the perceived cruelty, the extreme ethical disregard, especially targeting such vulnerable individuals.
It was a condemnation from within.
A powerful one. A declaration that a moral line had been obliterated, leaving a stain on the discipline.
And the fact it wasn't published suggests they knew, even then, it was problematic.
Exactly. The decision not to publish at the time was calculated, driven primarily by fears it would severely damage Dr. Wendell Johnson's reputation. This indicates that even in 1939, they understood, on some level, that the methodology was highly questionable and could provoke outrage.
They recognized the potential backlash.
Rather than seeing it as groundbreaking research to celebrate, they saw it could tarnish his standing. It highlights a pre-existing discomfort, a sense they were on very thin ethical ice. They chose self-preservation over transparency.
And the implications of keeping it secret for decades. What harm did that cause?
Enormous harm. It hid the damage, preventing any immediate scrutiny or intervention that might have helped the children. And crucially, it denied the victims the knowledge of what had actually happened to them.
They lived with the lie.
Believing they were the problem when they were victims. The concealment itself is part of the story, prolonging the suffering, postponing justice or understanding. It was a second layer of betrayal.
A betrayal on top of a betrayal. Okay, let's zoom out a bit, talk about the broader ethical context. This was a different time, before the strict ethical rules we have now. But that doesn't excuse it, right?
Absolutely not. It's crucial to frame it historically, not as an excuse, but to understand how it could happen. It was long before modern guidelines like the Belmont Report in '79 or the widespread use of institutional review boards, IRBs.
The Belmont Report that came out of things like Tuskegee.
Exactly. It codified core principles: respect for persons, beneficence, do good, avoid harm, and justice, fairness. And IRBs are the independent committees that review all human research now to ensure safety and rights are paramount. That robust framework just didn't exist in the same way in 1939.
Avoid where ambition could override decency.
Pretty much.
But even without those formal rules, by any reasonable human standard, this was a profound failure. Let's just list the ethical violations by today's standards. It's quite a list.
Without a doubt. First and foremost, no informed consent, kids too young, no proxy consent with full disclosure of harm. The concept was just absent. Coercion by omission.
And the population choice.
Clear exploitation of vulnerable populations. Orphaned children, dependent, no advocates, chosen because they couldn't resist. A fundamental red flag, taking advantage of that power
Well,
imbalance.
and the intervention itself?
Infliction of psychological harm without therapeutic benefit, perhaps the most damning. Deliberately causing distress and lasting damage with no intention to help the participants. Actively harming them to test a hypothesis, a perversion of any healing mission.
And then just leaving them with the damage.
Which is the egregious lack of follow-up care. No attempt to mitigate or reverse the harm, just left to suffer the consequences of a fabricated flaw without counseling, therapy, or even an explanation. Complete abandonment of responsibility.
When you lay it out like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's just horrifyingly clear. And it connects to other infamous ethical disasters in research, doesn't it? It feels like part of a pattern.
It does, unequivocally. You see parallels with Tuskegee black men with syphilis left untreated for decades, no consent, immense harm. Or the Stanford prison experiment, extreme psychological distress in a simulated prison. They all share this fundamental disregard for participant well-being when pursuing knowledge, prioritizing the question over the humans involved. Grim reminders of what happens when ethics take a back seat.
So this terrible secret, this monster, stayed buried for decades. But the truth, eventually it tends to come out. What brought this to light?
Thankfully, yes. It remained largely hidden until 2001. That's when investigative journalists at the San Jose Mercury News uncovered it and brought it to public attention.
The power of journalism.
Absolutely. Highlights the crucial role of tenacious investigative work in bringing historical injustices to light, forcing society to confront uncomfortable truths, even decades later. It gave a voice back to those who'd been silenced.
And once exposed, there was a long road to some kind of justice for the survivors, now elderly adults.
Indeed. In 2007, several surviving participants, then in their 70s and 80s, filed a lawsuit against the state of Iowa, seeking accountability for the harm they'd endured.
A powerful moment for them, I imagine.
Absolutely, allowing them to finally seek official recognition of the wrong done. The outcome was significant. The state issued a formal apology and paid nearly $1 million in settlements.
Wow.
A rare public acknowledgement of profound state-sanctioned harm. Symbolic, maybe small, but some measure of justice, some degree of closure, however late.
And Mary Tudor, the grad student,
Yeah.
any remorse from her?
Yes, there was. By then, much older, she reportedly expressed profound regret, described it as something that haunted her. She claimed she'd wanted to go back to the orphanage afterwards, try to reverse the harm, tell them the truth, offer remediation.
But she didn't.
She stated she was explicitly instructed not to by Johnson. He feared damage to his reputation, maybe the study's validity.
That adds to the tragic, complex layer. Does it absolve her? But
Suggests that maybe some participants recognized the ethical mess they were in, even if they felt powerless against institutional pressure at the time.
a fascinating, sad detail. It underlines that maybe not everyone was cold and calculating, but caught in a system prioritizing research above all else. So after digging into this dark history, what does it all mean for us today? What are the broader lessons from the monster study that still resonate?
Well, one of the biggest, most chilling takeaways is the immense, almost frightening power of labels, especially when applied by authority figures.
That idea of the self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. Being told repeatedly there's something wrong with you by someone you trust or depend on, it absolutely can become that. It shapes self-perception, often for life. It's not just believing a lie. The brain actively reinforces it.
How
When a child internalizes a label, stutterer, flawed speaker, bad, stupid, their developing brain starts looking for confirmation. It subtly filters out evidence that contradicts the label. It's like confirmation bias, solidifying the belief, affecting behavior, which then elicits reactions from others, reinforcing the original label.
a vicious cycle.
Unconsciously perpetuated, incredibly hard to break free from later without real intervention, and a shift in self-perception. If a child's told they're flawed, they often internalize that and act accordingly, regardless of their true potential.
It really makes you pause and think about how often authority figures, parents, teachers, coaches, doctors, even peers, shape a child's self-image, consciously or unconsciously. The study is like a magnifying glass on that dynamic.
Precisely. It's a stark reminder of the immense responsibility we have when we're in positions of authority over developing minds. A teacher's casual comment can crush or elevate. A parent's criticism builds shame. Their encouragement builds resilience. The monster study is monstrously exaggerated, but the underlying principles are universal, playing out subtly every day.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, it's not just history, is it? We can draw disturbing links to contemporary issues.
Absolutely. Think about bullying and verbal abuse today. The constant negative feedback, the shaming children experience online or in person, it mirrors the techniques used in the study. We know how devastating that can be, impacting self-esteem, leading to anxiety, depression. Worse, the study shows just how effective and damaging that negative conditioning is.
And it applies directly to teacher-student dynamics too.
For sure, it underscores the profound responsibility of educators. They can foster confidence, inspire, uplift, or inadvertently undermine through careless language or negativity. It highlights the ethical imperative for educators to be mindful of their language, their labels, their impact, pushes us to think about what a truly psychologically safe classroom looks like.
And in medicine and psychology, there's that parallel in the danger of misdiagnosis or over-pathologizing.
A profoundly important question for today. How often do we label normal childhood behaviors as disorders? The danger of pathologizing common traits, leading to unnecessary interventions, creating a self-perception of illness. It's a real concern. The monster study is an extreme example, but it shows the power of a label to shape identity, create perceived flaws, sparks a crucial conversation about careful diagnosis and the harm of medicalizing normal human variation.
Thankfully, grappling with these historical failures has led towards things like trauma-informed care. That feels like a direct response.
It absolutely is a vital evolution. Trauma-informed care emphasizes understanding the impact of trauma, including psychological abuse, like in this study, and integrating that understanding. It shifts from what's wrong with you to what happened to you.
Focusing on prevention and acknowledgement.
Exactly. Preventing re-traumatization, acknowledging the unseen impact of past adverse experiences, a move toward empathy, understanding, healing rather than judgment and harm, a direct acknowledgement of the wounds inflicted by studies like this.
This deep dive into the monster study is, well, it's a sobering journey. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, the pursuit of knowledge, the profound power of words.
It really does. It invites personal reflection. How have the words, the judgments of authority figures in your life, parents, teachers, bosses, mentors, shaped your own self-image? For better or worse, can you identify any labels you've carried that maybe were never truly accurate or fair, but shaped you anyway?
Because at its core, this deep dive is about uncovering those hidden forces. The story of these orphans, their voices manipulated, identities fractured, reminds us how environment, especially in those vulnerable childhood years, can subtly yet profoundly alter a life's trajectory, often without us realizing the origins of our anxieties or self-doubt till decades later.
The story of the monster study leaves us with this stark, enduring challenge to question authority, always, to protect the vulnerable among us with unwavering vigilance, and to truly understand the unseen yet immense ways our environment, particularly the words spoken within it, shapes who we become. Words have profound power to build, heal, affirm, and, chillingly, to harm. It's a power we have to wield with extreme care, constant vigilance, and an unshakable commitment to ethical humanity.